5 years, but I know there are early indications we might, but it wouldn't surprise me if we didn't. And I still think they could go straight, claw up to the top of the pile, even if they were that late. So just from historical behavior. But, technology cycles, I think, are shorter these days. So you'd expect there to be a shorter gap than like the consoles, which was like 10 years later Sony came behind. Maybe you can't be that late these days because it's an exponential improvement and, you'd be so far behind, but maybe you can be 3-4 years late.
One other category that could be an absolute game changer is the shopping, where VR, AR could obviate the need to physically go to a store to see a physical object.
Absolutely. And the browsing experience, but both, because there's something still about a browsing experience of like grouped things in a three-dimensional space that we're used to. Both that and the picking it off the shelf and then turning it around type of thing is already doable, because quite a lot of products, including most of Apple's, all of Apple's perhaps, have their AR view option, right? You can go into the Apple store right now, go AR view and move your phone around in 3D space, and that device is sitting there, but it's really clunky to do that. It's really weird to hold your phone at arm's length between you and some virtual device. But doing that in VR is going to be a very natural way of handling products. Obviously you won't get the weight and the tactility, but you're going to get a huge amount of a sense of scale and exactly what it looks like. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that use case alone could also be a real tremendous game changer. It could greatly reduce the the dependence of retail, the last remaining remnants of retail. I mean, retail's already been a bit decimated by online shopping. Smartphones kind of push that rock down the road even further, and VR could really take that quite far. So the next article says BlockSec, meaning security, SEC, a buggy smart contract on Mirror Protocol, a Terra DeFi app for betting on stocks, uses synthetic assets, was exploited for about $90 million over seven months. The exploit was accidentally discovered by Terra community member last week. It has been confirmed by security analysts at BlockSec. So another little stain there in the DeFi world. Security is an issue. So the next is from New York Times. They're doing a profile of Paramount Pictures, the movie company. 3 years into its streaming shift, an underdog choosing to continue alone as Netflix and Disney dominate and other streamers cut deals. It says the dominance of Netflix and Disney in streaming has forced many companies to join forces. So far, Paramount has gone its own way. And so the New York Times looks at why Paramount's going its own way. Maybe they don't have any geeks working there. Can be one reason. The next is from Pitchfork. I know we've never read any articles from Pitchfork before. Pitchfork is a music magazine. And the article says, it's a magazine for music lovers, let's put it that way. Maybe a geekier alternative to Rolling Stone, you could think of it. And it says how musicians like Weezer frontman Rivers Cuomo uses Discord, the voice and chat streaming app. Artists share ideas, host parties, and engage with fans who help with moderation and other tasks. Originally launched as a messaging app for gamers, the platform has become an intimate place for artists and fans to connect and build communities. And now you're seeing bands like Weezer appear and bands are starting to engage with their fans on platforms like that. That's quite interesting, honestly. That could be the future of how, by the way, the vision for social audio, like Clubhouse sort of deserves a lot of credit for pioneering, and Twitter for copying, and others for copying. And it was always assumed this is a great way as an extension of an augmentation of Twitter, where text is very suboptimal for having the conversation that we are having in this room. And so it has its own obvious use case, which is why Twitter was so impressed enough to copy it when they saw it. And indeed, just as Twitter has tremendous utility for celebrities of all kinds and bands and brands of all kinds, shouldn't social audio also have similar utility? Indeed, it does. And so it is rather inevitable that brands and celebrities and bands and what have you could very potentially, I think they have to figure out how to harness the medium of social audio. It's a totally new medium is what it is. And it takes a minute for people to get their heads around how to best utilize it. By the way, as an example, when YouTube came out, people did not know what to make on YouTube. For the first several years, it was cats on pianos almost exclusively, until Lonely Girl looked into the webcam and started baring her soul. And then it turned out it was fake, that it was scripted, even though the fans of Lonely Girl didn't know that. And it felt very sincere and very authentic, and she became, by many regards, the first sort of YouTube celebrity. And she also, in doing so, changed how people perceived YouTube as a platform. It was no longer about showing funny videos of funny, weird things you see around you from your phone's perspective. It's more about turning the camera on yourself and talking to the audience. That was a fundamental change, which is now a given, because you watch YouTube today and everyone's talking to the camera. That was not obvious when YouTube started at all. In fact, that was very counterintuitive when YouTube started, that you would talk to the camera and post that video. So anyway, the same with social audio. It is not yet clear what, it's not just a variation of podcasting. What is it? What will it be? How will it's the precise sort of format and protocols for how to engage from a brand perspective, from a band perspective, have yet to be clearly charted. But once it is, and once the benefits are realized, and if there's a good ROI for people's time, and I imagine there will be, and I believe, and I'm convinced that artists playing concerts in social audio rooms is going to happen. And I'm saying that as a former artist who had a record deal, that the idea that going on tour is quite laborious. You have to get in a vehicle and drive to the city and set up and tune the guitars and it's a whole lot of bullshit to play, for 90 minutes, where we could have a nearly equally intimate concert in a room like this. And many of us in these rooms have experienced that, to the credit of Clubhouse. If you've been in rooms with musicians playing, what we have not yet seen, we did see amateur musicians perform in Clubhouse. To the best of my knowledge, we've yet to, and it's a real shame, we have not yet seen an A-list musical celebrity participate in Clubhouse. That would be really interesting to see what that's like. And I'm talking, Taylor Swift or U2 or, Coldplay, or name your favorite multi-platinum selling artist. It would be, I'm really curious to see how people would feel about it if it was authentic. How much value they perceived to get from it. So it's weird that we haven't had that moment yet, and no doubt we will someday. And I'm curious which platform it will happen on now that Spotify has also cloned their version of Clubhouse. But we'll see. And I think that's going to be a massive use case. And so anyway, the next article that I have is from Bloomberg, that according to their research, the value of VC deals in China fell 44%. Not a surprise, as China beats up their own tech companies. And that it's been very weird to watch how heavy-handed the CCP has been with their own tech giants, which has scared the living Jesus out of every future unicorn founder in China. No, unquestionably, you're watching all of your idols, like Jack Ma, get softly incarcerated. That's going to really disincentivize you from creating the next great tech company in China. Maybe the CCP didn't factor that into their need to, be so punishing of the big tech giants in China. Anyway, so they're now paying a bit of a price that we knew they would be paying eventually, and now we're starting to see it. Next is from Nikkei Asia. Samsung says that the vice chairman met with the Intel CEO to discuss collaboration on semiconductors. And now those are two of the three biggest semiconductors in the world. It's number 2 and number 3. Number 1 being TSMC. Number 2 being, it's a kind of a toss-up between Samsung and Intel. Those are number 2 and number 3, and they're getting together, and they want to collaborate because they're number 2 and number 3. Number 2 and number 3 in every scenario always wants to collaborate to kind of take out number 1. So good luck to them. We'll see where that gets them. The next is from TechCrunch, a company called Vendia, a blockchain-based multi-cloud enterprise data sharing service, raises $30 million. And the America has overtaken Japan for the world's fastest supercomputer, powered by AMD. AMD-powered Frontier is now the world's fastest supercomputer, overtaking Japan's Fugaku, and it's not only just passed it, it's doubled it. So well done to go America. America's got the number 1 supercomputer yet again. Israel-based Simplicity, which simplifies enterprise security threat monitoring. What a surprise. Another Israeli cybersecurity company. Raises $26 million. BT partners with Ericsson to offer private 5G networks to companies in the UK, the first service of its kind. So British Telecom partners with Ericsson from Stockholm to offer private 5G networks. That's kind of cool. And it's one of the, I guess, benefits of the 5G architecture is that it's actually smaller antennas that are quite portable and everything else. So you could put a 5G antenna on a college campus to service a college, or on a corporate campus to service, your Google headquarters or whatever. So it's kind of ideal for that. You don't need, it's not as investment heavy as a traditional 4G tower. And I'm just to give you context as to what these private 5G networks will be about. The next is from the Wall Street Journal. There's a report that Google and Bing and YouTube regularly return Chinese state media content in top U.S. results on China's human rights records and the origins of COVID-19. What that means is, on issues important to Beijing, official Chinese sources also enjoy strong placement on YouTube and other widely used U.S. services. And that's because China understands they need to help control the narrative. So, on any narrative that China's understandably paranoid about, like, let's say, Tiananmen Square, they create content that favors their versions of the story. And they get it out there on these platforms like YouTube and Google and Bing and everything else. And Google and Bing and YouTube are showing results for that AstroTurf content. It's pretty simple, right? They're getting what they wanted. They're getting their fake, paid actor scripted narrative content into YouTube and Google, and so when people search for these things, that stuff's showing up because they're investing in putting that content there. Okay. Yeah, that's how those algorithms work. I guess the Wall Street Journal is concerned that those platforms aren't doing enough to silence these Chinese accounts. It says China's global campaign to expand its reach of its political positions is helping it to secure a coveted piece of online real estate first page search results on Google and other major Western portals. Content reflecting Beijing's position on its human rights record and the origins of COVID-19 now regularly appear among top results on Google and Bing and YouTube, according to a new report from the Brookings Institute. Researchers, you get the idea. I don't need to read it. So, for example, Chinese state-controlled outlets tended to account for half of YouTube's top 10 search results for Fort Detrick, a U.S. military bio-research facility that China has suggested, without evidence, could be where COVID-19 originated. So China created this conspiracy theory that COVID started in America at Fort Detrick, and so when you do a search for the word Fort Detrick, of course, you're going to get the Wikipedia page and normal results like you would expect. You're also going to see the content that China has funded about the COVID origins being from Fort Detrick. Yeah, it's misinformation. It's paid misinformation. Okay. Searches for Xinjiang returned content from Chinese state outlets in the top results on YouTube almost daily over the duration of the study. Yeah. Okay. So you want to, I guess you want to silence China, I guess, from the Wall Street Journal's perspective. Okay. What else? TikTok, YouTube, and other platforms have turned the defamation trial between Johnny Depp and Amber Heard into a sport, often glorifying Depp and mocking Heard. From the New York Times. Television turned the celebrity trial into a 24-hour tabloid spectacle. Social media made it into a sport that became a little more engaging and active, a little less passive. So Amanda Hess wrote the article. She says, on social media, the faces of Johnny Depp and Amber Heard have been frozen into masks of comedy and tragedy. He is perpetually smirking. She is perpetually aggrieved. And, you know, it's the meme making around these high profile events through social media. And hence she's referring to it as, you know, it's turned into a sport, a participatory sport, where you consume the content, you regurgitate it, you act on it. And this is precisely the type of article people had to write in when they were studying their communications degree at their local community college. And I'm guessing here, but I'm willing to bet that Amanda has a degree in communications, and this smells like a paper she probably wrote 2 years ago for her communications 201 course about how social media is going to become a sport.
I mean, if she's going to recycle work, I hope it's at least the 500 course level, Tyler, not the 201.
Okay, fair enough. She's in the graduate courses, folks. This is some graduate quality points she's making here. So she has an interesting point. But that's all of our big, boring tech news headlines for today. It's, again, a bit of a slow news day because the Americans are still getting out of their stupor, out of their drunken 3-day Memorial Day weekend. Welcome back, America. Glad to have you back.
We're still hungover, Tyler. We're still hungover.
I can sense it. So we go into the tweets.
Tyler, you sound jealous.
A lot. Thank you, Tom.
Well, us in the U.S., we don't want to let Tyler stereotype down, so we're just here representing.
So, yeah, Memorial Day weekend is, you know, like the 4th of July weekend. You know, you have these special summer 3-day weekends. You know, America only gets 2.5 weeks of holiday. You know, so they got to do what they can do with what they got. You know, these Europeans got these 6.5 weeks off. You know, Americans got to make the most of their 3-day weekends.
You had to rub it in.
With themselves.
So the first article that I have on the tweets.
Tyler?
Yes.
Tyler, it's Pat. I just wanted to circle back to that article you were reading about China topping or being at the top of some of the Google searches and stuff with articles that they produce themselves, just to give us a little bit of extra time to think about that.
Okay.
Because I think it's really quite an interesting way of working communications and press releases and spin and misinformation and all of that, because it's quite threatening, I feel, in that if there is a legitimacy in how that is done, and then it reaches the top of Google searches and whatever else searches, and that kind of information, giving China's biased or whatever it is perspective, it could lead to a lot of uncertain minds as to what's true and what's not, and makes it quite normalized. So then people, either they don't have the ability to decide what is real and what's not real, and it creates much more division and polarization and anger. And that sort of fierce heat that you're right and I'm wrong and I'm right and you're wrong kind of thing. I think it's quite scary. Thank you.
And especially it's target the Western world because Chinese people cannot see, basically the YouTube, TikTok because it's Douyin in their own version.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
I suppose it's about when reality is being distorted. And if everybody gets polarized and they believe that one reality and the other, we're going to have an even greater problem about reality, I fear. And then if other countries then start putting out their own spin, like the United States can do it too, can't it? The whatever office in U.S. government could start putting out its own versions of stories. Well, might be the real or might be slightly spun, but yeah, who then decides what is reality and the idea that yeah, how does history create itself therefore? And I know history is always changed and history is always deliberately um, some bits of history are cleared out and wiped out of the country's record of it, and that's happened for quite a while. But this is really a concerted effort, I think, is my point. Thank you.
Okay. Are we ready for the tweets? Did anyone find a tweet that they want to make sure we cover in the tweet section now that we're transitioning to the tweets?
I found a bunch, but I'm
Yes,
not
you did.
sure.
I'm about to read the ones that you just shared.
I'm waiting for the air horn.
Anyone else? Okay. Here we go. Hold on tight. The first one I have is from Saudamini from Business Insider, that shitbag of a dumpster fire called Business Insider. Elon Musk. So by the way, I now have to preface and caveat any Business Insider article by saying it's probably dog shit, but the headline says Elon Musk got into a Twitter fight with a satirical video game website. Elon Musk accused video game news site Hard Drive of being less funny than SNL on a bad day. Ouch. And said it was unfunny because it was woke. Okay. Thank you, Saudamini. And then Katerina shares one that a study finds a bidirectional relationship between children's hyperactivity and what? What was the punchline there? And harsh parenting. So there's a connection between harsh parenting and children's hyperactivity. I believe that. Which came first? Harsh parenting or problems in children? That's a great question.
That's a chicken or the egg conversation.
This can seem like a chicken and an egg problem. A new study published in Child Development finds that there is a reciprocal relationship between parenting style and child behaviors. Yeah, no shit. Suggesting that altering parental behavior could greatly help children with socio-emotional difficulties. Having socio-emotional behaviors in childhood is linked with increased chances of adverse outcomes later in life. There's a euphemism if ever I heard one. Adverse outcomes.
Hey, Tyler.
Yes.
I think there's a historical precedent for this. Bruno Bettelheim became a famous researcher by claiming that autism was caused by frigid mothers. And he successfully, for decades, ignored the fact that the same frigid mother would have one autistic child and 5 completely normal children. And I think the same will be evident at some point about hyperactivity in a high control parent. That they may have one hyperactive child and 1 or 2 or 3 children with no hyperactivity. So I think this conflation of correlation and causation in the psychological space, where it is so profoundly complex and multifactorial, is dangerous and in many ways a fool's errand. And there's so many other societal causes of hyperactivity, not to mention dietary, that we need to be careful taking these kind of reports at face value.
No doubt. It says,
Well, this is really like spanking and stuff like that, and it was a pretty big study. It's, you know, I think it's a little bit different, this
It says
study, than
harsh,
other stuff we're talking about.
harsh parenting is one such risk factor and can include behaviors such as yelling and spanking. The Patterson's coercion model views behavioral problems and maladaptive parenting as having a bidirectional relationship, with each increasing the other. Support for this model has been mixed, and this research seeks to further investigate the relationship. Okay, very interesting. The next is from SciTech Daily. New research shows that ADHD medication, that's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, doesn't help kids learn. Because the idea is these hyperactive kids with attention deficit disorder can't focus in school, so they give them medication so they can focus in school. That's what's the assumed outcome. And this report says, no, that isn't what's happening at all. It's not helping the kids learn. For decades, most doctors, parents, and teachers have believed that stimulant medications help children with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder learn. However, in the first study of its kind, scientists at the Center for Children and Families at Florida International University found medication has no detectable impact on how much children with ADHD learn in school classrooms. Approximately 10% of children in the U.S. are diagnosed with ADHD. What? Holy shit, is it that high now?
I knew it.
Yes, it's that high because last
It's
time
probably even
Dr.
higher. Yeah.
Yes,
and late are
1996, Dr. Dowse said of South Africa had mentioned at Tufts Medical that by this time we'd see about 70% increase on ADHD. He was absolutely correct, and the research pointed to it.
It also says 90% of them are on medication. Wow.
I'm sorry, but if I look how we have recess in Europe for kids throughout the whole, like until high school, we always have recess. Like in Germany and Portugal, my kids and myself, we always had recess after 90 minutes, 20 minutes, and after 50 minutes, we had 5 minutes recess. And we could go outside into the fresh air. And then in Germany, we only had school mostly in the mornings, not also in the afternoon. And I think just by letting kids having daylight and move around in between, like I go crazy if I sit 8 hours inside, just sitting. Like as an adult, this is a treatment that is, it shouldn't be allowed. Like if I hold in a lab dogs, if I would, I don't, but if I would have to make sure they have a species acknowledgement treatment. So they would have to go outside every day for a walk a bunch of times. And we are not doing that with our kids. We don't have a species required treatment for our kids in schools here in the US. We don't. They sit inside the whole day. They have only time, like 15 minutes in high school sometimes to have lunch. It's ridiculous.
Okay. So, the next one is also from Katerina. Deep under the ocean, a fresh source of green power takes shape. Tested in one of the world's strongest ocean currents, a prototype generator could herald the start of a new stream of renewable energy. What type of energy is it, Katerina? Please tell me it's wave energy.
Which one are you? I'm sorry, I was
The wave,
muted.
the Bloomberg.
The deep under?
Yes.
Yeah, it's ocean turbine. This heavy machinery is a subsea turbine that harnesses the energy in deep ocean currents and converts it into a
Awesome.
steady, reliable source of
Awesome.
electricity.
Awesome.
Yeah.
There it is. There, we did it. We did it, folks. We did it. Fuck yeah. I love that. You know how much energy is going on in ocean currents? It's like wind, but below the surface of the water. It's stronger, obviously, than wind. And why not harness that energy? We absolutely should be harnessing that energy. Because all of the complaints about wind turbines, right, that they make noise, they cause bad dreams, people who live nearby, they kill birds, blah, 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 blah. Let's pray to God they don't scare the fucking fish, or heaven forbid the dolphins or whatever. I don't imagine they will.
Katerina, did they talk about how much energy in the harvesting process and if it's scalable?
In Japan, right now, it's a test. This is a big trial. This is a 330-ton prototype, and it will be anchored to the sea at the depth of 30 to 50 meters. So the commercial production is to do this on-site turbines in Kuroshio current in the so to produce them very close to where they will deploy them. But until now, this is a prototype. It's not. I'm not sure how they will scale it. But yeah, it's a start in the right direction.
Okay. Yeah. Ocean current energy. That's huge. Next, from Saudamini Kumar, the Indian government has proposed to issue a digital rupee, a central bank digital currency, in fiscal year 2022-2023. So here comes the digital rupee. Discussion paper on digital rupee is fairly ready, says government. What do we make of India coming out with their own central bank digital currency?
Listen, the way I see it, they're developing a serious brain ecosystem. They have also been doing a lot in the business arena to position themselves, creating a decentralized platform for their exchange also places them in a better seat of power in terms of how they can position themselves in negotiations with other countries. Again, I see them sort of elevating a great deal and maybe positioning themselves to become the country of resource for multiple people. And that shifts the conversation in terms of their power play. So
Right.
I love what they're doing. I just don't know where that places us in the conversation.
Right. So here's, looking at this rather soberly, connecting the dots going backwards, India has shown a real penchant for forcing foreign tech companies to kowtow to New Delhi's demands, namely Facebook and Twitter. And they seem to have a bit of a track record for self-interest, promoting their own self-interests, which are rather nationalistic and digital and what have you. I can easily foresee Delhi forcing the tech companies that if Facebook wants to continue, and WhatsApp, by the way, WhatsApp is testing payments right now in India. We've read those headlines, have we not? That's the market
Absolutely.
Right, that's the market WhatsApp's testing payments in. I can imagine China just forced their two biggest payment apps, WeChat and Alipay, to use their central bank Chinese digital yuan, digital currency. Right? That has led, this week, America to tell Apple and Google to ban all apps in their app stores that use the Chinese digital bank currency. I foresee that India is going to do the opposite. They're going to force American apps doing business in India to use the digital rupee as the payment vehicle inside of their apps in India. If you want to allow buying, there's this huge battle between Walmart and Flipkart and Amazon in India and all that. Wait until India's like, yeah, that's all great. That's lovely. You're all going to have to use the digital rupee. All of you.
We're entering the digital proxy war over dollar denomination of international exchange.
It's particular. I think that point that I'm and John are both raising is a very likely scenario because just yesterday, didn't we just read how India's forcing all of the VPNs to comply with state demands about exposing who's behind the VPNs? And it's essentially India's really waking up to the power of data in the same way that China did 10 years ago. That this is
Exactly.
how.
But Tyler,
Yeah, yes,
India is supposed to be a democracy. It's not
yes,
supposed to do what China might be
yeah.
doing.
Okay, right. Which means they're not supposed to abuse the power of the data in the way that China clearly will. And maybe they won't, but they certainly want the ability to
Leverage it.
leverage it. Right. Well said.
And remember, Flipkart.
This could get really interesting if India quickly pushes digital rupee on all the apps in India. It seems like something they would do. Okay.
I think it's a very safe wager
Yeah.
to go
Given
10x on that trajectory.
right. Yeah, I think it is too, given what they've done in recent history. Okay. So, and by the way, I don't think anyone else, unless you've been a regular tech news listener for a year straight and seen the article, the Indian articles that we've dove into, you can connect those dots. But if you haven't been here, you can't connect those dots. But if you have heard all of those, 100+ articles in a row, the picture starts to develop quite nicely. Oh, okay, we can see where this is going to go in a way that I don't think anyone else can see at this point.
Tyler,
That's
I have
really
a question.
yes.
Isn't it similar whether you have a CBDC or whether, because right now, right, for example, if I have a multi-currency account in Singapore, right, but it is definitely still more cost effective to transact in local currency, which is Sing dollar, right? So
Yeah.
even if you have US CBDC, it doesn't mean that even India government allow that, but it doesn't mean that the Indian will use it because it's definitely going to be more cost effective to trade in their own local currency when they are in India, right? I mean,
sorry.
just saying. I mean, the exchange rate still applies, right? Even if it's a digital currency.
Say it again, please.
Okay, it's mathematics. It's foreign exchange, right? So when you are in a local country, for example, I'm in Singapore, it is definitely more cost effective to trade. I mean, to exchange, to transact in Sing dollar instead of US dollar, even when I have a multi-currency account. Likewise, in Japan, I will use yen rather than US dollar because to trade in Japanese yen is more cost effective because I will not incur the exchange rate. So-called, I'm sure bank will make some money out of the exchange rate, right? So likewise, even if India don't ban the US CBDC, the local people in India will still choose to use the local currency, whether is it digital form or is it the other form, I mean the original form.
I think India's going
Will
to
be more cost effective.
The India's going to try and erase the non-digital form or diminish it as much as possible. They're also, I can imagine the next natural progression beyond that is to do what China is trying to do, which is use their own unicorn apps like Paytm and whatever that happen to go beyond their own national borders, which probably into Southeast Asia most notably. You'll get some Indian apps that grow into Thailand, for example. And the digital rupee could, if Thailand doesn't have a digital payment, China is trying to, for example, use their apps internationally as a way to have international users hold their digital currency, their digital yuan. That we know this because this is precisely why the US is trying to ban all apps that in the Google or Apple app stores that use the Chinese digital currency. America doesn't care that they're using it in China. They're concerned with China's strategy of leveraging those super apps that are very popular in many parts of the world. There's even Chinese apps that are like TikTok, for example, is incredibly popular in the US. What if China tells TikTok, yeah, you're only going to use the Chinese digital currency as the form of currency, and so now every TikTok influencer who wants to get paid in anything can only get paid in Chinese digital currency, and the U.S. is going to be like, fuck that. So TikTok's going to be in a really sticky situation. Do they stay in the U.S. And operate under Or is China going to force them to use their currencies? America going to force them not to? That's going to be a really interesting standoff. And India could do the same. But the fact that India is doing this indicates to me it's natural that China is the first to figure these kinds of things out and understand them from a data perspective. India is figuring it out right now as we speak. That means the U.S. is having meetings about it right now and will soon figure it out in the same way that India just figured it out. And that means the U.S. will then realize, shit, we have to introduce our central bank digital currency because India just did theirs, China's done theirs. We got to jump into this party. And when America introduces, watch the punchline on this thought. When the U.S. introduces its central bank digital currency, the digital dollar, will it do what I'm suggesting India will do with theirs, or China is doing with theirs, which is force all American apps, and we have a few. You might have heard of some of these apps. What if America tells its big American tech companies and all of its apps, you must use the central bank digital dollar as the way to engage with all of the accounts users globally? Go ahead, Sharon.
Yeah, I was just going to confirm that on the federal level, there were conversations 2 years ago about a digital currency. It was to be called Fed coins. I don't know if you guys know about that. I did tap on the shoulder of a friend who's actually working on the project as to why they didn't launch, because I thought it was insane. We weren't first to move in this arena. There were things that he said he couldn't disclose, but my estimation is it's exactly that. They don't know exactly how to leverage it throughout the nation without a lot of pushback.
Okay, so next up here, hold on. From, who did this one? Katerina. Chinese scientists call for a plan to destroy Elon Musk's Starlink satellites. Microwave jammers, mini satellites, and space lasers could be used to scuttle Starlink. Boy, they really don't want to give anyone the opportunity to speak freely. What are you so afraid of, China?
I have a question. If
Yes.
China government really shoot down those satellites, so how will this settled? I mean, Elon Musk, because this international affairs now, who's gonna be the judge or how to start the case? Because the U.S. government,
No, it goes to
yeah,
spaceport.
space court.
Yes,
So,
you get the Romulans in there to help decide what's going to happen.
oh, okay, thank you.
Don't forget the Kardashians.
Because I don't think the U.S. government would jump into as a representative for Elon Musk.
Chinese military researchers say Starlink could threaten China's national security. Damn right, that's why we're
But
doing
it
it.
can. Exactly, but it can.
Chinese military researchers have called for the development of a hard-kill weapon to destroy Elon Musk's Starlink satellite system if it threatens China's national security. The researchers drew attention to Starlink's, quote, huge potential for military applications and the need for China to develop countermeasures to surveil, disable, and even destroy the growing satellite mega constellation. Their paper was published last month in the Journal of China's Modern Defense Technology. A translated copy of the paper is available here. Let's pin that bad boy to the top of the room. Here we go. It's on a WordPress site. There you go. Look at China using the WordPress. There it is.
Can you imagine the conversation between Putin and Xi on the Ukrainian rescue of Starlink?
Yeah. The article translated below from the PRC discusses countering a military threat. Here it is. Multifaceted penetration to multiply military advantages. Of course, this is a translation from Mandarin, so it's going to sound a little weird. While Starlink claims to be a civilian program that provides high-speed internet services, it has a strong military background, as well as evidenced by the fact that some of the launch sites are built within the Vandenberg Air Force Base. And the encrypted interconnection between the satellites and Air Force fighters has been included into their technical verification tests. As a matter of fact, Starlink has cooperated with American military many times. In 2019, SpaceX received funds from the U.S. Air Force to test how well Starlink satellites can connect with military aircraft under encryption. In May 2020, the U.S. Army signed an agreement with SpaceX on the use of Starlink's broadband to transmit data across military networks. In October 2020, SpaceX won a $150 million U.S. contract to develop military-use satellites. And in March 2021, just 2 months ago, it announced a plan to work with the U.S. Air Force to further test the Starlink internet. When completed, Starlink satellites can be mounted with reconnaissance, navigation, and meteorological devices to further enhance the U.S. military's combat capability in such areas as reconnaissance, remote sensing, communication relay, navigation and positioning, attack and collision, and space sheltering. Yep. And now you know.
It's rather, yeah.
Elon's part of the deep state, yo.
It's rather like the pot calling the kettle black, isn't it? I suppose they have the ability to think of these conspiracies with Musk and the space, whatever, and linking it to the US government, because they themselves, surely in China, all the developments they have scientifically is so closely linked to government departments and government incentives and decrees and demands that they can then transpose that idea to the West. Whether we do it or not is something else, of course.
Yeah, but I mean, credit to Charles Johnson, who did say a year ago that Starlink basically puts Musk in a very favorable position with the U.S. military and the Pentagon, and that they really perceive SpaceX as a tremendous asset. And China gives rather interesting, compelling theories as to just how beneficial it could be to the American system. And China's response is quite interesting in the way that Pat's describing, in that China very much is doing with Huawei's 5G antennas what they're projecting onto SpaceX with Starlink. As they've turned it into a tool of the state for kind of espionage and geopolitical, global espionage schemes and whatnot. So there you go. So it's not a surprise that they would cook up these kind of ideas. The next art, speaking of which, the next one is also about China from BB, from South China Morning Post, which is, the headline says that Shenzhen teams up with Meituan. Shenzhen's the big, incredibly large city in China where all of the manufacturing of every device you've ever touched is from. And they've teamed up with Meituan, which is their biggest delivery company in China, for a $4.5 million Chinese digital currency lottery. Shenzhen will give away the digital yuan red packets worth about $4.5 million via local service Meituan. I guess they're giving them out somewhat randomly, maybe. The red pack.
Yeah, it's a lottery thing. So if that means they are encourage you to install the app, the app. Yeah, that's yeah.
I get it. So it's a bit of a marketing scam to entice people to buy more shit. You might receive randomly, in a lottery kind of a sense, you'll be delivered a red envelope full of digital cash, essentially. In China, cash is delivered in red envelopes. This red envelope marketing campaign is all about sending you digital currency in red envelopes randomly if every time you buy something, you qualify to receive a red envelope potentially or whatever. Yes, something like that.
And yeah, and it's also, I think, as a promotion of the digital yuan as well.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay. Next up from Saudamini, Indian EV makers soon follow the BIS standards for batteries amid fires. As fires and explosions in electric vehicles continue unabated, the government is all set to introduce EV battery standards. Yeah, that'll hopefully help diminish the number of explosions you're having over there with the batteries if you implement the standards that the West have probably. You gotta. If you're going to be playing with combustible things, it helps to follow protocols and standards. So the next is from Katerina. Speaking of, baby formula. So baby formula makers hit the auction block. The maker of Enfamil is seeking a new owner. What is this all about, Katerina? One of the big baby formula manufacturers is for sale. I guess Katerina moved on. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I was away from my phone doing stuff. Yeah, exactly. It's on sale, and the transition will probably make more issues to reliably catch up with the demand of the baby formula, and yeah, it's not very. It's quite concerning, I think. And I only found this news in this particular. I don't know. It's not the New York Times or anything like that, which is surprising.
Okay. More articles here from BB, from the Wall Street Journal. It says job hunters flock to Slack to land offers fast. Popular at work, the instant messaging application has also become a speedy, more informal way for professionals and employers to find each other. Instant messaging platform Slack. Okay, and which is owned by LinkedIn, by the way, yes? Or Salesforce. Salesforce bought Slack, actually. The next one is that a quarter of the world's internet user infrastructure is susceptible to attacks. The study found that a large number of internet users live in regions where attackers could just target one or a few companies, can cripple an entire nation. There you go. I just retweeted it to the Tech News Twitter account, TNATW. So if you're living outside of Israel or the US or China, and it gives a map of where you're most susceptible. And boy, is India quite susceptible to attacks. And then the next one is about the new Chinese space station. And it says China released new details about the final stages of work on the Tiangong space station, which you can now see, to challenge the US in space. And then the next one says traffic jams are just a math problem, says Israeli AI firm. Israel's traffic congestion ranks near the worst among developed economies, but an algorithm can help, says one of the country's IT firms. Let's use supercomputers and AI to solve traffic. Why not? That begs the question, will a city full of self-driving cars be able to avoid piling up as we do as humans? I think they will. I think that'll be one of the best things about them, actually. If they can.
Isn't Way with Israel?
Yes, it is. Waze was an Israeli startup acquired by Google for $1 billion several years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, so you imagine EVs able to communicate with each other about traffic congestion and in real time responding. Of course, they'll be able to maneuver a whole lot better than us.
On that topic, the next tweet from Saudamini is, it says, taking the strain out of parking in busy cities with AI. AI that helps drivers find parking spaces in busy city centers is being developed by the University of Bath in the UK. There you go. So not only will you
bring that to New York immediately.
Not only will you avoid the traffic, you'll find the available parking meter. And the next is new printing method for artificial skin containing heat sensors. While this can accelerate productivity, it does come with health and safety risks, etc. So I'm retweeting that one. Thank you, Saudamini. And Singapore gradually replacing manpower with robotic technologies or robots. This is the headline. Singapore has 605 robots installed for every 10,000 employees in the manufacturing industry. Singapore
automation.
Gradually replacing manpower with robots is the headline. Let that sink in as you start to understand that robots are going to replace, and AIs and software are going to continue to replace every possible thing. We're going to try and automate as much as possible. We have now millions of app developers trying to automate everything that every human does. There's software for my hotel that tries to automate every human interaction so that I no longer need to answer any questions from anybody about anything. The whole book, everything from the time that the future guest sees the property, and the whole booking is automated through Stripe. Stripe automates that almost entirely. The questions they have can now be answered through AI bots. They arrive, and there's dozens, if not hundreds, of startups trying to automate every piece of the chain, from the time the guest looks for the room to the time they check out. So and that's not unique to the hotel industry. Every industry you can think of has an army of developers trying to automate and remove humans from every step of the procedure.
Hey, Tyler, they are, but they're not
if I
there.
can
I mean,
also add, we had
how effective are your chatbots? Like in a lot of industries, a lot of these things, I mean, they're working on it. It's just not as far along as a lot of people are the hype. And if you look at actually, I think it's A16Z that did a recent podcast on robotics as a service, basically just discussing this, the landscape of it. What's the problem you're trying to solve, and how are robotics, which can be, either machines or parts of machines or AI or anything else, but how specialized are they and how effective are they? So it's still just looking at where we are in that actual path.
So Google.
if I can add, like I had a speaker from IBM Switzerland working on neuromorphic devices. Before these devices were researched, I think it was quite unrealistic to have all this computing power and enough resources for it to replace humans. Just things like replacing the visual system of a human, right? But these new neuromorphic devices that will soon be deployable by IBM and universities are working on them. They really replicate quite well the human visual system. Just for example, for cameras, and the device's computation is becoming way cheaper, so they need less resources, and they will. With this technology, it's becoming more and more realistic to actually replacing humans in all sorts of areas with these neuromorphic devices. So I would look into that, because before that was before those advancements were published this year and last year, I had my doubts, but you can compute almost everything on the edge with them.
So, bizarre coincidence. The next tweet is, here it is, the headline. Elon Musk was right. Bots really are everywhere online. Subheadline, it's getting harder to tell a bot from a person. So let's read a little bit of the article. And as we do, I hope they mention the new Google team's announcement from last week that they've made a tremendous upgrade from GPT-3 to something in the realm of GPT-4. Because if that GPT-4, when we get there, and we will in the next few years, that should solve that problem. GPT-4 will then be available to developers like Intercom, who make that little pop-up window in the bottom right corner of every website you go to that says, hey, how can I help you? And it's obviously not a human most of the time. and they try to automate as much as they can, because the tools available under GPT-3 are not sufficient to have a true human conversation about a difficult issue. GPT-4 very potentially will solve that, and that should happen in the next 2 to 3 years. So, what happens?
Yeah, Tyler, Kevin Rose or whatever his name is, the writer. Actually, that's one of their big predictions: is what happens in the future if the internet is primarily bots. So it's done by, and again, that could be very helpful or it could be very disruptive, right? Because what's disinformation that's getting, so you have a lot of current scenarios that you could bring forward to that, but that is, when you're looking at future proofing or all of that stuff, it's, when the internet is 80 to 90% done by machines and not humans, what does that mean? So good points.
Well, by the way, there's more than just creating the bot. What I believe will happen is, you as the hotel will need to program the bot to answer the questions in the way you want, obviously. And the easiest way to make that frictionless for the hotel is to simply let the bot review all of your previous correspondences and current correspondences, so that it can train itself how to answer every particular question. I'm imagining a high degree of sensitivity and nuance. And so, I mean, it'll be basically trying to mirror as much as it's possible, as closely as possible, to whoever is answering the questions today. And I'm confident we're about a couple years out from a very satisfactory level of mirroring from an automated system in that way.
Yeah. That's an automated chat, like a chat. You're using like a sort of a closed system, like a response for your, you're using for hotels this, and you're right. I worked on those a few years ago, and they were very rudimentary because you're looking at low level intelligence, looking at what are the common questions and what would be the right answer. And as you say, that's accelerating very quickly, and you're going to have AI that's much faster reading, current interactions. But it's also just normal traffic on the web. Again, when you have bots that are just amplifying news, or, I mean, who knows how they're going to interact? It's not just in a closed environment or with intended consequences, right? There can be a lot of externalities. So it's just something to keep aware of, or be aware of.
Okay. Next up, a firm partners with Stripe to expand offering of buy now, pay later services. Fantastic. Through the venture, Stripe merchants will be able to use the firm's adaptive checkout service, which allows customers to split purchases of up to $30,000. There you go. This is huge for both Stripe and Affirm. So basically, every merchant who has Stripe, which is pretty much everyone on the internet, will now be able to offer buy now, pay later. So I would expect.
Do you have the stats? Sorry, another one, but the stats on that, because the stats are they're having a huge non-payment issue. Same with credit cards. So you're getting a lot of default, and so a lot of the younger people who that buy now pay later appeals to don't seem to understand that they have to pay later, and so they have a huge non-payment. It's hitting their credit, and it's also, that's one reason that some of these companies are struggling, is because of the failure to pay. So I think it's around 70. I don't know if their numbers out, but it's really high. So, I mean, if you look at it, I mean, it's just layaway, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what they are is risk calculators, and it's not an easy puzzle to solve, and they use lots of very interesting variables, and it's personalized for each user. So interesting to see inside under the covers. What
Like very high. It's like getting approved for a credit card, but much more sophisticated, right? And it's at point of sale. So as it's not just buy pay later where you sign up. It's huge. Like that's what their secret sauce is those ability to calculate the risk. So they're pulling a ton of data at point of sale to enable that service. And it's a big benefit to the retailer or whoever, because they wouldn't normally be able to make that sale. But again, it's still a big risk calculation.
Okay. Ready for the next one?
I wanted to maybe add, I'm not sure, but if you see the relation, but I had from Caltech, there's a group that developed machine learning technology now that you can basically ask for causality and if the data makes sense. So it's a really cool new machine learning technology. And actually, the professor from Caltech, he made a startup now based on that. So it's really exciting because until now, all this data sets, you needed a human to make sense out of it and pre-assess or post-assess if the causality there makes any sense. But with their technology itself will be able to come up with the answer why and if the data output makes any.
1 second. Okay. Russia state spent $8 million on censorship dodging VPNs. Katerina, you had this one? The Russian Federal Treasury published 236 official contracts for VPN technology totaling about $10 million. They control the VPNs in Russia in the same way that India does, no doubt, where all the VPNs essentially are puppets of the state, fool people into a false sense of security. I'm almost certain that's the case. I imagine it's the same in China too. The next one from TechCrunch: New York-based digital asset to help Japan's financial giant with their smart yen. Here it comes. Just like I said, now that India's figured it out, here comes Japan with the smart yen. And that means the US is going to come up quick. Everyone's waking up. They got to make their own central bank digital currency. Cinemas now accepting digital ID cards. Young cinema goers can now prove their age using an app instead of taking ID documents with them. Okay. And Professor Ossoff has one that the FDA is investigating a hepatitis A outbreak linked to organic strawberries sold at Walmart, Safeway, and other retailers. Oh, that sucks. To date, the FDA has reported 17 hepatitis A illnesses and 12 hospitalizations linked to 2 different brands of strawberries. South Africa wants to give every resident free broadband. Can it pull it off? Yeah, maybe. Netflix's plan to charge people for sharing passwords is already a mess before it's even begun, report suggests. Netflix has been trialing a new policy to charge people for sharing their account outside of their households in Costa Rica, Chile, and Peru. Yeah, you got to test that shit first because that shit is everywhere, and if it doesn't work, you got to make sure it works before you spread that one out because that's ubiquitous. And Katerina has an interesting one from The Guardian that Tamagotchi kids could be the future of parenthood by having virtual children in the metaverse. Oh my goodness, I didn't really consider that. According to an expert on AI, would-be parents will soon be able to opt for cheap and cuddleable digital offspring. Oh my dear Lord. Oh my God, you thought the birth rate was declining quickly now? Wait until your kid only exists in the goddamn metaverse. If you do have the urge for... Oh my God.
They still won't clean their room.
No, they're going to make that thing realistic as possible. This is wild. This is a wild concept, though, because it could do both things simultaneously. You could design a kid that will scare anybody from ever wanting to have one, or you can make one so pleasant that it removes the need to have a real one.
I mean,
Are they going to listen and keep the room clean?
Dr. Fran?
If they keep the room the room clean, then you know what? Real kids are gonna have tough competition there.
They already have a lot of virtual children and pets in some of the virtual worlds. Another phenomenon that's related to this is that people form virtual families who are actual people. Like there are a lot of adults who do what's called child play, and they look to be adopted by virtual families. So that's been going on for years. Done.
Uh-huh. Okay, speaking of that issue, BB found a related article that China's population is about to shrink for the first time since the Great Famine 60 years ago. It predicts an annual average decline of more than 1% of its population annually. Wow, that means a cut in half in 50 years. After 2021, pushing China's population down by 587 million, more than half a billion in 2100. So yeah, 70 years from now. Less than half of what it is today. I'll bet it goes even faster than that once they realize they can have their kids in the metaverse. Wow.
I have a serious question though, and I don't know the answer to this. Isn't it? I mean, you don't want to have a world where most of the people are elderly, but I think a decrease in the population would not be such a bad thing for the Earth. Am I wrong?
Say it again.
Would a decrease in population be that awful for the planet? I mean, resources are getting short as we speak.
Here's the debate on that. That's
It's bad
called
for the demographics.
it's called natalism. There's a movement, that supports the idea that we should have less people because that's for the betterment of the planet. Elon Musk would argue the opposite, that basically we need as many smart brains as possible to help get us out of the mess that we're in. And you only need potentially the next, Nikola Tesla or, next genius to. It takes one mega genius, one Einstein, to potentially save the world. So, in theory, we should be having as many kids as possible to increase our chances of having the next Einstein that solves the problem.
Isn't there also something as in the way that how we've developed our economic system and our social welfare system, our social support networks around all the countries that require us to have a certain number of people in the population that could help to pay for future generations through pension funds and that sort of thing. And because we've created a system, we need to have a certain number there. Without them, with demographics going down, we are going to hit a problem.
Yeah. So, the next one.
That's true, but there's also that question of the changing demographics. So a lot of ethnicities would be gone because of lower birth rates, while others are going to flourish because they're not abiding by whatever game that they're playing. So it'll end up changing the demographics of the world, and a lot of people don't like that.
Okay.
By demographics in that description, you probably mean people of color, which yes, a lot of people don't fancy the future looking quite that shade.
Yes.
That's the majority of people in the world look that shade, so I don't think it is to do with that. It just depends if you are Trump or you're Bush or you're Blair or you're Cameron. It depends, but I think if you look at the UK, our cabinet has a very diverse mix of people.
But not quite as diverse in their thinking processes.
It's an evolution, not a revolution.
Okay, whatever.
Okay, so the next one is from Saudamini, from India. Basically, Elon Musk did a tweet recently that says Tesla will not put a manufacturing plant in any location where we are not allowed first to sell and service cars. And the founder of Ola Electric in India said thanks but no thanks as a response, which only makes sense to people in India, really. Ola is getting quite popular. They're making these very cool electric scooters that I really, really want, actually. And would love help getting one as soon as they're out of the version 1 buggy cycle. And anyway, his tweet on Saturday came in response to Musk's statements a day earlier. Tesla will not, anyway, so that's not much of a story there. The next one from Katerina, that 6G will be here by 2030, according to Nokia's CEO. Smartphones may be
Yes, gotta believe it.
Smartphones may be out by then, though, according to the same source.
Yeah, your next phone might actually be a VR headset.
Yep. So the next one is from who? Employers from South Media. Employers keen to offer exorbitant pay packages and salaries for tech remote workers. Firms are expected to boost tech hiring with pay jumps of between 15 and 30%. Okay, and the next one says there are now fully driverless cars with no human behind the wheel. In many U.S. cities, tech company Argo AI is testing out its driverless fleet in 2 U.S. cities without a safety driver present. Yes, here come the driverless cars in our popular cities. Germany's tech company Merck to open a semiconductor base in Chicago. That's great. Apple's new patent reveals radical new camera technology for future iPhones. Yep. You gotta improve the camera every year or you won't buy the phone. Singapore's robot workforce plugs labor gaps. Singapore is replacing manpower with robots. It's a variation of the earlier article, but from a different source. Nike sold an NFT sneaker for $134,000. In April, Nike released its first collection of virtual sneakers called Crypto Kicks, which comprised 20,000 NFTs.
Didn't they have one like last year, similar to this idea? It was like for $450 each. It came with a token of some kind.
Yeah. Amazon, Google, and other tech companies gave massive pay hike. Companies including Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and others have reportedly hiked their salaries for their employees. Okay, I'm noticing a trend here. Russia Central Bank sees space crypto international trade. I think they don't have an option because nobody wants their currency. And Valerie has one from Wired that the Chinese government recently began saber rattling about American cyber espionage. Yeah, well, that's indeed very old news. They never stopped that. And then Matt also has the story.
Began?
Yeah, Matt also shared a story about the supercomputer in the U.S. surpassing the Japanese supercomputer. And that brings us to the end of today's tweets. So my apologies if you sent a tweet that I didn't get to, but I think we pretty much got through all of the tweets that we need to get through for today, and we'll do it again tomorrow. I hope you join us. Thank you, everybody, for another tech news around the world. Yes, May or Francine.
Tyler, did you discuss the rape of the avatar in Facebook's Horizon World, Meta's
I did
Horizon
not.
World?
I did not.
You didn't? I'll send it to you. We can discuss it tomorrow.
Okay. Good enough. Thank you, everybody. Yes.
I don't know if
Same
this is
bad time, same bad
You
Okay.
could say something quick here.
What's up?
Bye all.
Thanks,
I
everyone.
run a
Bye.
technology room in Arabic language, so if anybody from around the